The next one is about a crime case. And it goes like this. If the defendant avoided the crime scene, then the crime scene would be free of the defendant's fingerprints. That's a if-then statement, which I believe most juries would accept as a possible explanation for why fingerprints of a defendant were never found. See, on the side, we could do a little arrow diagram here. That P is one explanation for Q. Q is maybe the police said that the defendant's fingerprints were never at the scene. They dusted and all that, and the defendant's prints were not there. And let's assume that there's a lawyer for the defendant trying to argue to the jury why the defendant's prints were never there. They might say the reason that they weren't there is because the defendant avoided the scene and was never at the scene. So he was never there to make any prints. Okay, so the first part of the statement is the P, avoiding of the scene. The second part, being free of the prints, is the Q of the statement. So what's given this time? Last time P was given. What's given here? It's Q this time. Yeah. So Q is given as evidence. So let's say the police testify. They say, yep, we dusted the scene. Defendant's prints were not there, definitely. The lawyer is trying to argue to the jury that the reason why the prints weren't found is because the defendant was never at the scene. That is P, that he's trying to get the jury to agree with. We want to make a truth table to determine whether that conclusion is 100% guaranteed and there's no other possible conclusion that could be drawn, or will the truth table reveal a different scenario where other conclusions could be possible. I'll let you try it. Here's my example. If you draw a truth table like me, then write premise above the given columns and circle the truths in the premise columns, and then see if any conclusion can definitely be made here or not. I'll let you try it. All right, so the statement P was defendant avoided the scene. Q was that his prints were never found there. P arrow Q is the if-then statement. If the defendant avoided the scene, and that is a good reason why his prints wouldn't be there. All right, so let's get all combinations of true and false. These trues and falses are just standard for any truth table. I'm not basing them on any particular situation. It's just always the same. And then the conditional is only false when true leads to false. Okay, now what was a premise? So the premises are the givens. So we have to write premise above the P arrow Q column. And we'll circle the truths in that column. Okay, another premise was that the fingerprints weren't found. So that's actually Q is a premise. So you circle those truths. And now I'll ask you, in which row or rows are we in complete agreement with both of the givens? Which rows are possible in this scenario, in other words, logically speaking? What do you see? Yeah, one. One is possible. In row 1, avoiding the scene leads to prints not being found. And prints weren't found, therefore the cause could be maybe the defendant did stay away from the scene, and that's the reason why the prints weren't found. But is anything else possible? Any other row? Row 3 as well. It's possible for everything that was stated in the givens to be true, but maybe that defendant didn't avoid the scene, and maybe there's some other cause for the prints not being there. So, what are some other causes that could lead to Q besides P? Yeah, if you watch those CSI shows or anything, you might know, yeah, they might have worn gloves. And that's the explanation for Q. And so actually they were at the scene, but just they didn't leave prints for another reason. It's also possible they might have wiped prints clean before they left or something. And there could be some other explanation too. The point is that knowing that Q has occurred does not allow us to determine definitively what the cause was. That's what the lawyer's asking you to do here when they're asking you to conclude P. They're trying to get you to say that happened. However, in math, should we consider this conclusion valid or invalid? In math, things have to be 100% certain to be considered valid. In the real world, they don't. Like in a court case, for example, all you have to have is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They don't say proof beyond all doubt. They don't say 100% certainty. That would be impossible. They're trying to get the jury to put together what had happened based on looking at the evidence and coming up with their best guess of the way it went down. What type of reasoning is the lawyer really asking the jury to use to come to this conclusion? Is abductive. The jury is trying to figure out why, the cause for what had happened. An inductive example would be you'd have to see somebody wearing gloves and then seeing that they didn't leave prints. And you'd have to see them wearing gloves again and then see that they didn't leave prints. And over again, eventually you say every time somebody wears gloves, they don't leave prints. See, the inductive would be a if-then statement. But here you are just concluding P as a cause. That's abductive, okay?